Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about research methods. What is its definitions, what are different type of research methods, and what are different type of examples of the research methods. So first of all, research methods are a specific procedure for collecting and analyzing the data. So this is the procedure for collecting and analyzing the data. Developing your research method is an integral part of the research design. When planning your methods, there are two key decisions that you have to take. First, decide how you will like to collect the data. Your method depends on what type of data you need to answer your research question. So there can be qualitative data versus quantitative data. Will your data take the form of word or numbers? So if it is in the form of words, then it will be called qualitative. If it is in the form of numbers, then it will be qualitative. Primary versus secondary. So your data can be primary or secondary. Will you collect original data yourself, or will you do research based on the secondary data or sources which are already available? Descriptive versus experimental. Will you take measurement of something as it is, or will you perform an experiment to analyze the results? Second, we have to decide how want to analyze the data. For quantitative data, you can use statistical analysis methods to test relationship between variables. For qualitative data, we can use methods such as thematic analysis to interpret patterns and meaning of the data, Method for collecting data. So data is the information that you collect for a purpose of answering your research question. So all it depends on your research question, whether you want to do a qualitative or quantitative research. The type of data you need depends on the aim of your research. Qualitative versus quantitative data. Your choice of qualitative or quantitative data depends on the type of the knowledge you want to develop. For questions about ideas, experiences, and meanings, or study something that cannot be described numerically, we we collect a qualitative data like historical time series data. We analyze what is the pattern of the change in the cultural custom and traditions. If you want to develop a more mechanistic understanding of a topic, your research involves hypothesis testing. Collect quantitative data and test the hypothesis whether this is correct or not. So there are pros and cons of both qualitative as well as quantitative data. The pros of qualitative data is that it is flexible. You can often adjust your methods as you go to develop your new knowledge. It can be conducted with a small sample of the data. But at the same time, there are cons also. It cannot be analyzed statistically and cannot be generalizable to broader population. It is difficult for standard research at higher risk of research bias. There is higher risk of research bias in the qualitative data. But when we do quantitative data, it can be used to systematically describe the larger collection of the things, generate reproducible knowledge. It requires statistical training to analyze the data and require larger samples of the data so that it can be used in the software like Excel, SPSS, and other R Square Studio and others. You can also take a mixed method approach where you use both qualitative as well as quantitative method to do your research. This is most common because sometimes we have to analyze different aspects and we get data. Some data might be qualitative, some might be quantitative. Next, we have to understand what is difference between primary data versus secondary research. Primary research is any in original data that you collect yourself. So these are the data that you collect yourself for the purpose of answering your research questions through survey, observation, or experiment. Secondary research is data is that which we can collect, which are collected by other researchers or government agencies like census or statistical organizations. If you are exploring a novel research question, you will probably need to collect primary data. But if you want to synthesize existing knowledge, analyze historical trends, or identify the pattern of a larger scale, secondary data can be useful. So again, there are pros and cons of primary and secondary data. The primary data can be collected to answer your specific research question. You have control over the sampling and measurement methods. Whereas it has negative impact also, more expensive and time consuming process. It requires training in data collection methods when we want to collect large amount of data. Whereas in the secondary sources it is easier and faster to access. You can collect data that span longer time spans or broader geographical area. But if we want to do survey, it will take a large number of amount of time, and we cannot probably complete a research. But at the same time, there are some negative impact also, like no control over how data was generated. So you don't have authentic information whether the data are authentic or not. Require extra processing to make sure it works for your analysis. So you should focus that only the data which are collected by authentic government sources should be adopted for analyzing in these secondary data analysis. So there are again two type of data, descriptive and experimental data. In the descriptive research, you collect data about a study subject without intervening. The validity of your research will depend on the sampling method that you take. In experimental research, you systematically intervene in process and measure the outcome. The validity of the research will depend on your experiment design. To conduct an experiment, you need to be able to vary your independent variables precisely to measure your dependent variable and control the confounding variables. It is practically and ethically possible. This method is the best choice for answering questions which are cause and effect related problems. So again, we will learn about pros and cons of the descriptive as well as experimental data. Descriptive data allows us to describe your research subject without influencing it. You can gather more data on a larger scale, but at the same time, no control over confounding variables can't establish causality. In the case of experimental data, more control over confounding variables, we can establish causality effect, and but there is some concept, so you might influence your research subject by unexpected way, usually require more expertise and resource in data collection. So experimental data can be conducted based on the laboratory lab which we have access to. Some chemical and mechanical subjects related works can only be done through the experimental, and when we have access to good resources, then only we can do research on such topics. Again, there are different research methods for collecting different data and analyzing the data. The research method for collecting data, different data, are experiments. This is primary source, and this can be quantitative. To test cause and effect relationship, we collect data through experiment. Surveys is very popular method of data collection. It is a primary, it is a quantitative method, and this is used to understand general characteristics of a population. Interview and focus group is also another primary methods. It is qualitative methods. To gain more in-depth understanding of a topic or a subject, we do focus group interviews. Observation in another methods. of primary survey. It can be either qualitative or quantitative to understand how something occurred in a natural settings. So if you want to study the number of growth of trees in a particular area after rainy season, then it can be quantitative data. But if you want to analyze the effect of temperature on rain on a particular area, then it can be qualitative. So literature review is another good research technique. It is a secondary source and it can be either qualitative and quantitative. And this is to situate your research in an existing body of work or to evaluate trends within a research topic. So our literature study or systematic literature review or meta-analysis research are done through literature review. Case study is a very good tool for studying. It can be primary either or it can be secondary also, and it can be both qualitative as well as quantitative, because if you want to do some ethnographic survey case study, then it will be qualitative, but if you want to do some demographic study, then it can be quantitative. To get in-depth understanding of a specific group or context, we can do a case study. So we have to focus on a particular area and then we can do the case study. So methods, there are different methods for analyzing the data. Our data analysis method will depend on the type of the data that we collect and how we want to prepare it for analysis. Data can often be analyzed both qualitative as well as quantitatively. For example, survey responses could be analyzed qualitatively by conducting the measuring of the responses or quantitatively by studying the frequency of the responses given for the questionnaire. Qualitative analysis methods are methods which are based on to understand the words, ideas and experiences. From open-ended surveys, interview, literature review, case study, ethnographic, and non-probability sampling methods we can use to analyze the qualitative data. Qualitative analysis tends to be quite flexible and relies on the researcher's judgment. You have to reflect carefully on the choices and assumptions that you take so that you can avoid the research bias, which is very important in doing the qualitative research. Quantitative research methods are different and it depends on the frequencies, average, correlation, regression, and if cause and effect relationship study. And this can be used either during the experiment and after the experiment to understand the probability of the sampling methods. Because data is collected and analyzed in a statistically valid way, the results of the quantitative data can be easily standardized and shared among researchers, and the same can be repeated or replicated by other researchers in different case study. So we have to mention the methods of the research in a proper manner so that other can adopt it and do it. So here are some of the examples of the analyzing data. So statistical analysis can be done for quantitative data to analyze the data collected in a valid manner. For example, experiments, surveys, and observations can be analyzed using the statistical tools. Meta-analysis is also a quantitative data analysis to statistically analyze the result of a large collection of studies. Thematic analysis or content analysis can be either qualitative or quantitative, and it is used to analyze the data collected from an interview, focus group, or textual sources to understand general theme in their research and how they are communicated. In the content analysis, we analyze large volume of the textual and visual data collected from surveys, literature review, and other sources, and can be quantitative based on the frequencies of the words, or can be qualitative like the meaning of the words that are being changed over time. So we have studied different methods of the data collection, data analyzing, data types like primary, secondary, qualitative, quantitative, and what are different type of research methods that can be used. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe to our channel and like the video and share with your friends. Thank you.